Today I want to talk to us about something that I think is very important for our Christian journey, and it's looking at things with our spiritual eyes. We're going to take our text today from John chapter 6, and it's the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. We're not going to read the entire chapter, but I do encourage you at some point that you sit down and read this chapter. We're just going to kind of pick through some verses, and we're going to talk about them as we get there. So we're going to look at John chapter 6, and we're going to begin in verse 5. And it says, "Then Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, 'Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?' But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do." I want us to look at that verse 6 right there. Jesus asked that question to Philip because he already knew what he was going to do. So why would he ask the question? I think that Jesus was going to test his disciples to see how they were going to look at problems and how they were going to look at things when he wasn't there. Were they going to choose to look at things with their physical eyes, or they were going to choose to look at things with their spiritual eyes? Philip went on to answer him and said that half a year's wages wouldn't buy enough bread to feed all these people. So Philip was totally looking at the problem in the physical realm and looking to solve the problem with physical things. Now we're going to move on to verse 8. And it says, "One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, 'There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many?'" See, Andrew almost got it. When Jesus asked the question, what are we going to do to feed the 5,000? Andrew goes out and starts looking for a way. And then he finds this little boy that has just 2 little loaves and 5 little fish, or 5 little loaves and 2 little fish, and he says, "Well, here, Jesus, here's this, but it's not enough. It's never going to be enough to feed all of these people." But something very important was happening here. I think Andrew was about to get it. He was about to understand who Jesus was and what Jesus could do by presenting him with what little he had. And I think that's a very important lesson for us to get right now, is to understand that we don't always have to have enough, or we don't always have to have all of the answers and everything we need to solve our problems. We simply bring what we have and offer all that we have to Jesus, and that's enough. That's enough. That's all he's ever asking. He goes on in the scripture lesson here to give thanks for the loaves and the fish and breaks them. And then down here in verse 12, after everybody had enough to eat and they were filled, he says something else that I want us to take a look at. So verse 12, he says, "So when they were filled, he said," talking about Jesus, "Jesus said to his disciples, 'Gather up the fragments that remain so that nothing is lost.'" I think sometimes we forget that passage altogether. Gather up all of the scraps, all of the fragments that were left, so that nothing is wasted. Now I find that very interesting, because I think sometimes when God has performed miracles in our lives or blessed us beyond what we can all hope and imagine, sometimes we forget to bless others. Because some of the greatest blessings that we have is when God gives us something, and through us we take that gift and we bless somebody else with it. And I think that's a very important lesson, and I think that's something he was trying to tell us here. That we need to let blessings flow through us. We don't need to just hold on to them. We need to let go and let somebody else be blessed by the things that he has given us. Then I want us to move on down into verse 22, and it says this: On the following day, when the people who were standing on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other boat there except the one which the disciples had entered, but his disciples had gone away alone. Now, basically what we're talking here, and I just kind of want us to look at the first line. Basically what he's talking about here is Jesus had saw the multitude that night, and he knew that they were coming after him, and they wanted to make him king at that particular time, that he got in a boat with some of his disciples, and they departed, and they left to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Sea of Galilee is a not very big sea. I did some research on that. It's very small. And you were able to take a boat trip from one side to the other in basically a matter of hours. The Amplified Bible, in that very first line of verse 22, the Amplified Bible says, all those that remained that day went to the sea to look for Jesus. So I want us to think about this for just a minute. We have 5,000 men and women and children that were fed by Jesus the previous day. They were fed by him, and then most of them had departed. There were only a very few that remained, and they took some small boats, and they went out looking to the other side of the Sea of Galilee for Jesus. So we're talking about a very small number of people out of 5,000. So I want us to understand that before we move on. So we're talking about a very small group of people getting in a boat and going to the other side of the Sea of Galilee to look for Jesus. And on down in verse 26, when they found him, we'll back up to verse 25. When they found him, they said this, and when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you come here? Then Jesus, in verse 26, answered them and said, most assuredly I say to you, you seek me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. Now, Jesus didn't answer their question saying, why did you come here? Jesus simply made another statement and said, you didn't come looking for me because you ate of the signs that I give you. You ate of those physical things. You came looking to me for something different. You came looking to me because you were filled. That's the word he used. You ate and you were filled. He's talking about something more than just our physical stomach being full here. He's talking about that spirit, that need that the Spirit had, that need was satisfied on that day. And that's why they were coming to look for him. So here's the crux of the message today, right there in that verse. We need to seek Jesus because of who he is, not because of the things that he can do for us. And I think that was one of the lessons that whole 2-day journey situation was not just to feed a bunch of people on the hillside. It was getting down to the point that we can't just look for Jesus for what he can do for us. We need to look to him for who he is. Seek his face and not his hands. And I think that was the lesson that he was trying to get the disciples and everybody else there. Don't just look at things as physical problems and physical things. Look with your spiritual eyes and look for Jesus in that spirit. And anything and everything we do, presenting everything we have to him, and look for him, not just for the things that he can do. I hope this has brought a little bit of encouragement to you, and I hope you found just a little bit of something that you can hold on to. And I challenge you to begin to look for Jesus in everything you can do, and you're going to have an amazing journey. Thank you, and God bless you.